They say the woods around Black Hollow breathe at night. I never believed it when I was younger. I thought it was just something old folks whisper to keep kids from wandering too far into the trees. But as I stand at the edge of town, staring into the mist curling through the pines, I swear I can hear something moving. Not the wind, not the rustling of animals. Something deeper, something watching. The people of Black Hollow don't talk about the things that lurk past the tree line. They sip their coffee at the diner, go about their business, and pretend the town is just like any other. But I know better. My grandfather knew better. And now, whether I like it or not, it's my turn to face what's coming. The first sign of trouble came 3 nights ago when Daniel Carter disappeared. The sheriff said the boy must have run off. Happens all the time, he told me. Kids getting restless in small towns. Maybe he hitched a ride out, chasing dreams bigger than this place could offer. But I've seen what happens when someone leaves without a trace. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no goodbyes, just gone. The same way it happened 20 years ago, and 40 before that. I step inside Graves & Sons Auto Repair, my family's shop, though I'm the last Graves left to run it. The scent of motor oil and rust clings to the air, a familiar comfort in a town that always feels like it's hiding something. I wipe my hands on a rag and glance at the faded photo hanging by the register. My grandfather stares back at me, his face hardened by years of hunting things no one believed in. The old man tried to prepare me for this, but I was too stubborn to listen. The bell above the door jingles, and I turn to see Elias Monroe, the town bartender and one of the only people I trust, stepping inside. His expression is grim. "You heard?" he asks. "About Daniel?" "Yeah." Elias leans against the counter, lowering his voice. "It's happening again, isn't it?" I nod slowly. "Feels like it." He runs a hand through his graying hair. "Damn. Thought maybe it was done with us." So did I. The Hollow Man, my grandfather's name for whatever stalks this town, works in cycles. The stories stretch back generations, whispered warnings passed down through the years. When the disappearances start, they don't stop until the Hollow Man has taken what it wants. I look out the window. The sky is overcast, thick with heavy clouds. The woods loom just beyond the main road, dark even in daylight. The breath of Black Hollow, as my grandfather used to call it. "What do you think we should do?" Elias asks. I exhale sharply. "Find him before it's too late." The words feel hollow. I don't know if Daniel is still alive. I don't know if I can stop what's coming. But I do know this. I come from a long line of hunters. This town may have forgotten the old ways, but I haven't. And if the Hollow Man is waking up, then I need to be ready. The air in Black Hollow had always felt heavy, thick with the weight of things left unsaid. Tonight, though, it was different. It pressed against my skin, crawled along my spine like unseen fingers. The wind barely stirred, yet the trees swayed, their branches creaking as if whispering to one another. I gripped my flashlight tighter and stepped deeper into the woods. Daniel Carter had vanished 2 nights ago. The sheriff said he ran away. I knew better. His mother had called me in tears. "Matthew, please," she begged. I don't believe them. Daniel wouldn't just leave. I promised her I'd find the truth, though I wasn't sure she'd like what I uncovered. The boy's last known location was here, a narrow path leading into the forest behind the school, the place where the town's stories always began. I knelt down, scanning the dirt for tracks. The search teams had come through already, but I knew what to look for. Then I saw them. Footprints, deep and uneven, as if someone had been dragged. A chill worked its way through my body. The prints stopped abruptly a few feet ahead, ending in a patch of flattened grass. No sign of struggle, no scattered belongings. Just nothing, as if he had been lifted straight into the air. I swallowed hard and raised my flashlight. That's when I saw the marks on the trees. Long, jagged scratches ran down the bark, carved deep, too high up to be from an animal. They formed a twisted pattern, something I had seen before. My grandfather's journal. The same symbols he had drawn when he spoke of the Hollow Man. A dry rustling sound made me turn. Nothing. Just trees and shadows. The wind had stopped entirely. No leaves moved. I took a slow breath and scanned the area again, my fingers tightening around the flashlight. I was being watched. I couldn't see it, but I felt it, a presence just out of reach. Then the whisper came. It was soft, almost gentle, like a breath against my ear. My name. I spun around, my heart hammering. The trees stretched tall and lifeless, the darkness between them yawning like open mouths. The whisper came again, this time from behind me. Matthew. My blood ran cold. I backed away, but my foot snagged on a root, and I hit the ground hard. The flashlight rolled from my grip, its beam swinging wildly across the trees. For a split second, it landed on something. A figure, tall and possibly thin, standing too still. The light barely touched it before it was gone, swallowed by the dark. My breath came in ragged gasps as I scrambled to my feet and grabbed the flashlight. I shined it into the trees, sweeping the beam back and forth. Nothing. But the whisper remained. Close now, closer than before. I forced my legs to move, walking fast, then running. The air grew heavier with every step, pressing against my chest. I didn't stop until I reached the clearing near the town's edge, where the glow of streetlights finally cut through the black. Only then did the whisper fade. I stood there, panting, trying to make sense of what I had just seen, or what I thought I had seen. The hollow man was real, and he was awake. I just didn't know if I was too late to stop him. I woke up to the sound of whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind slipping through the cracks in my cabin, but then I heard my name. Soft, drawn out, and coming from somewhere inside the room. My pulse pounded as I reached for the flashlight on my nightstand, flicking it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the same old wooden walls, the same cluttered desk covered in my grandfather's old journals. I was alone. I let out a slow breath, but my skin prickled with unease. The whispers had felt too real, too close. Maybe it was just exhaustion messing with my head. I had barely slept since Daniel Carter disappeared, and now the whole town was on edge. I got out of bed and pulled on my jacket, deciding that fresh air might help. Stepping outside, I scanned the tree line. Black Hollow was a quiet town, even more so at night, but something about the silence felt wrong. The usual sounds of crickets and rustling leaves were gone, replaced by a heavy stillness. The kind that presses against your ribs and makes it hard to breathe. I turned back toward my cabin, but then movement. In the distance, just past the old oak tree near my driveway, stood a figure. It was tall and motionless, its face lost in the shadows. My grip on the flashlight tightened as I lifted the beam toward it. But the moment the light touched it, nothing. The figure was gone. I swallowed hard. I hadn't blinked. I hadn't looked away. 1 second it was there, and the next it wasn't. My breath came quicker now, misting in the cold air. I forced myself to turn around, to go back inside. Locking the door behind me, I pressed my back against the wood, heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to sleep, or at least convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. The next morning, I found the first sign that I wasn't imagining things. The town's local grocer, Mrs. Callahan, was sweeping her front porch when I stopped by for coffee. She paused, gripping the broom tighter. "Did you hear them?" she asked, voice hushed. I frowned. "Hear what?" She looked around as if someone might be listening, then leaned in. "The voices." A chill crept up my spine. "Last night," she whispered, "I woke up and thought my late husband was calling my name. But when I got up to check, the sound was coming from outside, near the woods. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't the only one hearing things. As I left the store, my hands felt unsteady. The hollow man wasn't just watching me. He was creeping into the town's mind, the way my grandfather had described in his journals. That night, the whispers returned. But this time, they didn't stay outside. They were inside my cabin. The voice curled around the edges of the room, soft and distorted, seeping into the walls like a sickness. I could feel it pressing against my skull, whispering things I couldn't understand. Then I saw it. My bedroom mirror, old and cracked at the edges, no longer reflected the room correctly. The bed was there, the nightstand, the chair, but my reflection wasn't mine. The man in the mirror stood with his arms at his sides, his head tilted slightly. His face was blurred, shifting like smoke, features refusing to form. I couldn't move. He took a step forward. The mirror cracked. I stumbled backward, chest heaving. The whispers stopped, leaving behind a deafening silence. When I forced myself to look again, the mirror was just a mirror. My own wide-eyed reflection stared back at me, but my skin was clammy, my pupils too dilated. I wasn't safe here. I wasn't safe anywhere. The next morning, I found a message scratched into my bedroom wall, not carved by a knife or any tool I could recognize. The letters were jagged, uneven, almost like claw marks. You cannot hide from what you are. A sickening realization settled in my gut. The Hollow Man wasn't just haunting me. He was waiting. I knew the town would never believe me. They hadn't believed my grandfather either. But this time, it was different. The fear was real. I could see it in their eyes, the way their hands trembled when they locked their doors at night. Something was happening in Black Hollow, and, deep down, they knew it. Yet, they still refused to listen. I stood in the middle of the diner, my voice raw from arguing. How many people have to disappear before you open your damn eyes? The sheriff leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, the same dismissive look on his face he always wore when I tried to talk about the Hollow Man. Matthew, you're scaring people. I let out a sharp laugh. Good. Maybe they should be scared. Maybe then they'd stop pretending this isn't happening. Murmurs spread across the room. Some shook their heads. Others refused to look at me at all. Mrs. Lorne, who ran the bakery down the street, set her coffee down with a shaky hand. You sound just like your grandfather. He used to come in here, ranting about things lurking in the woods. Look where that got him. I clenched my fists. That got him saving your lives. The sheriff stood, his heavy boots scraping against the floor. Enough. His voice was low but firm. We're done here. I knew it was pointless. They wouldn't believe me until the Hollow Man was standing at their door. I left without another word. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside. The town felt emptier than usual. Shadows stretched long under the dim streetlights, twisting unnaturally. I made my way to Monroe's Tavern. If there was one person in this town who still had sense, it was Elias. The place was nearly empty when I walked in. Elias was behind the counter, cleaning a glass, but when he looked up and saw me, something in his expression changed. It was subtle, just a flicker of hesitation before he gave a tight nod. I sat down at the bar. You've seen it too, haven't you? Elias exhaled through his nose, setting the glass down. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the bottle of whiskey and poured himself a drink. I watched as his hand trembled slightly. Finally, he spoke. I've been hearing things, Matt. His voice was quieter than usual. Whispers. At night. In my house. A chill ran through me. It's getting to you. He nodded, rubbing a hand down his face. I keep thinking maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I'm losing it. He looked up, eyes dark with something I didn't like. But then I hear my name, and I know I'm not imagining it. The Hollow Man was marking him, just like he had marked me. I leaned in. You need to leave town. Tonight. Get as far away as you can. Elias let out a hollow laugh. You think that'll help? Before I could answer, the lights in the bar flickered. We both froze. A long, breathless silence filled the room. Then, faint, so faint I almost convinced myself I hadn't heard it, came a whisper. A voice neither of us recognized. Matthew. I stood so fast my chair scraped against the floor. Elias was already reaching for the shotgun he kept under the counter. The whisper came again, this time from behind me. I turned sharply. No one was there. Elias looked pale. Did you hear that? I nodded. It's here. The air in the room felt heavier. The kind of weight that pressed against your chest made your breath come short. Then the front door slammed open. The wind howled through the tavern, knocking over glasses and rattling the light fixtures. The temperature dropped so fast that my breath fogged in front of me. Elias gripped his shotgun tighter. We need to get out of here. But before we could move, the whisper came again, louder this time, clearer. You're next. Elias stiffened. His fingers went slack. The shotgun fell from his grip, hitting the floor with a dull thud. His eyes went empty. I reached for him. Elias. Then, just like that, he was gone. No sound. No movement. Nothing but the faint echo of his name lingering in the air. One moment he was there. The next I was alone, and the Hollow Man was watching. The woods swallowed me whole. The deeper I walked, the more the air thickened, pressing against my skin like something alive. The trees stretched high above me, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands, blotting out the moonlight. There was no wind, no sound, just an eerie, suffocating stillness. I followed my grandfather's old hunting trail, the one he had written about in his journal. The dirt beneath my boots felt softer than it should, like the earth had been disturbed recently. My flashlight flickered, its weak beam barely cutting through the darkness. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I had to find Elias. The deeper I went, the more I noticed something was wrong. The trees looked the same, exactly the same. The same gnarled trunks, the same tangled roots. I walked for what felt like an hour, but I kept passing the same broken branch, the same half-buried rock. I wasn't moving forward. Something was playing with me. Then I heard it. A whisper, curling through the trees like a breath against my ear. Matthew. I froze. The voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't far. It came from everywhere. I turned in a slow circle, gripping my flashlight so hard my knuckles ached. Elias. My voice came out hoarse. Silence. Then footsteps. Soft, shuffling steps, circling me, just beyond the reach of my light. I spun, trying to catch movement, but the shadows swallowed everything whole. I swallowed hard. Elias, if that's you, say something. Another whisper, closer this time. You shouldn't have come. My breath caught in my throat. The flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness collapsed around me. I fumbled with the switch, smacking it against my palm, but the light refused to return. My pulse pounded against my ribs as I took a cautious step forward. The ground shifted beneath my feet. I staggered, trying to regain my balance, but suddenly the forest wasn't the forest anymore. The air grew thick and humid, the scent of damp stone filling my lungs. My boots scuffed against something smooth, cold, not dirt but tiled floor. A deep, sinking feeling coiled in my stomach. I wasn't in the woods anymore. I was somewhere else. A dim, unnatural glow pulsed ahead of me, revealing a long corridor made of black stone. The walls were damp, slick with something I didn't want to name. Doors lined each side, warped and crooked, as if they had been forced into the walls rather than built. And then I saw him. Elias. He stood at the end of the corridor, bathed in the faint glow. His back was turned to me, his posture stiff and unnatural. Relief rushed through me. Elias. He didn't move. I took a step forward. Elias, we have to get out of here. He turned. A cold chill slammed into me. His eyes weren't there. Just hollow, gaping sockets, dark and endless. His mouth twisted into something that wasn't a smile, too wide, too stretched. His lips parted, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was mine. You shouldn't have come. I stumbled back, my breath ragged. The walls groaned, shifting, pulsing like something alive. The doors rattled, whispers seeping through the cracks, voices I didn't recognize, some pleading, some laughing, some screaming. Elias took a step forward. I took another step back. You're not real, I muttered. This isn't real. The thing wearing Elias's face tilted its head. Not yet. And then the doors burst open. Hands, too many hands, reached out, clawing at the air, grasping for me. Fingers scraped against my jacket, my skin. The whispers turned to shrieks, a chorus of broken voices dragging me under. I fought. I kicked, shoved, tore myself free, but the more I struggled, the deeper I sank into the nightmare. Then a sound. A low, distant chime, echoing through the chaos. For a moment, everything froze. The hands retreated, the voices fell silent. And then I was falling fast. My lungs burned, my limbs flailed. And then, I hit the ground hard. The air rushed from my chest. The damp scent of soil filled my nose. I gasped, my fingers digging into the dirt. I was back in the forest. The nightmare was gone. Or at least, I thought it was. I sat up, my breath shaky, my skin clammy with sweat. My flashlight lay beside me, its beam steady once more. But as I reached for it, my fingers brushed something else. A journal. Not mine. My grandfather's. And scrawled across the open page, in fresh, dark ink, were 4 words that made my blood turn to ice. You brought it back. The journal was heavier than I remembered. Maybe it was my shaking hands. Or maybe it was the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I sat on the edge of my bed, the dim glow of my bedside lamp flickering, as if it, too, was afraid of what I was about to read. The room smelled of old paper and dust, mixed with something else, something faint and metallic. I ran my fingers over the cracked leather cover of my grandfather's journal, the initials GG, barely visible beneath years of wear. I had read it before, memorized the stories of his hunts, the monsters he had fought. But there were pages near the end that had been stuck together, sealed by time or by something far worse. With a deep breath, I peeled them apart. The first thing I noticed was the handwriting. It wasn't like the rest of the journal, neat and confident. These words were written in a frantic scrawl, ink smeared, letters jagged and uneven. It looked like my grandfather had been in a hurry, or in pain. If you are reading this, then you already know. The Hollow Man is not a monster that can be killed. He's a disease, a parasite, and I was a fool to think I could end him. My breath caught in my throat. I turned the page. More rushed words, more warnings. He doesn't die. He moves, from body to body, mind to mind. He doesn't just haunt people. He becomes them. And once he chooses you, there is no escape. I gripped the edge of the journal, my pulse hammering in my ears. My grandfather had fought the Hollow Man, just like I was now. But if he hadn't killed it, then how had he survived? My stomach twisted as I read the next passage. I was young when he found me. Thought I was strong enough to resist. Thought I was the hunter, not the prey. But I was wrong. He got inside my head, twisted my thoughts, made me doubt what was real and what was him. And when the time came, I made a choice. A terrible, necessary choice. The air in the room felt too thick to breathe. I turned the page and found something worse than words. A drawing, rough and dark, etched deep into the paper. It showed two figures, one standing, the other kneeling. Their hands were clasped together, as if in prayer, but their faces. The standing figure was empty, hollow. The kneeling one had its mouth open in a silent scream. Below the image, my grandfather's final confession. The Hollow Man cannot be killed, only given. He was inside me for years, whispering, waiting. I cannot let him take me completely. So I passed him on. I found someone close, someone strong. And I let him in. I let him go. I recoiled, nearly dropping the journal. Passed him on, to someone close. The realization hit me like a blow to the chest. He had given the Hollow Man to someone else. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the remaining pages, hoping for some kind of explanation, some kind of justification. But there was nothing. Just smudges of ink, frantic scratches, half-formed words. And then, at the very bottom of the last page, written in shaky, fading script, "Forgive me, grandson." The room spun. The walls seemed to close in. My grandfather, he had been the Hollow Man, and when he had grown too weak to fight him, he had found someone else. Someone strong enough to take the burden. Someone like me. I felt something shift inside me. A memory, a whisper, a shadow moving in the corner of my mind. My reflection in the mirror across the room seemed wrong. The edges of my face blurred, my eyes darker than I remembered. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breath shallow. No, I wouldn't let this happen. I wouldn't be like him. But deep in the back of my mind, something laughed. The cold mist clung to the trees like a shroud, and the air tasted bitter, like it was trying to warn me. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Every rustle of the wind, every snap of a twig felt like a scream in the silence. I knew what was waiting for me out there, and I could feel the weight of it pressing in from all sides. The Hollow Man was near. The altar stood ahead, covered in moss and twisted vines, as ancient as the mountain itself. My grandfather had always spoken of it in hushed tones, how it was built long ago by hunters like him, to trap things that should never be allowed to roam free. I thought of the pages from his journal, of the warning he left behind. The Hollow Man could not be destroyed. He could only be transferred. I wasn't sure if I was prepared to carry that weight. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as I moved closer to the altar. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from fear. Fear of what I had to do, fear of what I might become. But there was no turning back now. The ritual had to be done. If I didn't finish this, if I didn't trap the Hollow Man forever, everyone I cared about would suffer. Elias had already fallen victim to him. The town was on the brink of losing itself. I stood before the stone slab, breathing hard, the scent of damp earth filling my lungs. The air felt thicker here, as if the very land itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make the next move. My grandfather's journal had been clear. There was no easy way out of this. But the page that stuck with me the most was the one that whispered about the price. To seal the Hollow Man away forever, I had to become a part of the darkness myself. The ground beneath my feet seemed to groan as I knelt before the altar, placing the ritual tools, my grandfather's knife, the strange symbols he had drawn, the blood from the fallen, on the stone surface. Everything felt heavier than it should have, and, for a moment, I thought I could hear something breathing behind me. Something unnatural. I forced myself to stay still. The hollow man was near. I could feel him now, his presence creeping up my spine like a cold hand, slipping into the back of my mind, whispering my name. Matthew. It wasn't a voice I could hear with my ears, but it was there, pressing against the walls of my thoughts. The voice was soft, almost soothing, like it was wrapping itself around my very soul. The hollow man had been watching me for days, maybe longer. He knew I was coming, knew what I had to do, and he wanted me to fail. I set my jaw, gripping the knife tightly. The blade felt cold against my palm, sharper than I had ever remembered. There was no hesitation now. I couldn't afford to hesitate. The ritual had to be completed. I whispered the first incantation, the words tumbling from my mouth like a forgotten prayer. As I spoke, the air around me seemed to shift, the ground beneath me trembling faintly. The mist swirled around the altar, growing thicker, thicker still, until it felt as though the whole forest had wrapped itself in a blanket of darkness. The hollow man was close, too close. I felt his presence now, swirling just outside my vision. "You cannot hide from what you are," the hollow man said, his voice low, raspy, like a death rattle in my ear. I shuddered but pushed forward, whispering the second incantation. The knife in my hand seemed to hum with power, a pulse that echoed deep within my chest. I didn't know what the price would be, but I knew one thing for sure. I was all in now. I could already feel it, the change, the darkness creeping beneath my skin. It was pulling at me, tugging at my very soul. The hollow man was right there, inches away, his form barely visible in the mist, just a dark shape in the corner of my vision. I reached for the final piece of the ritual, the blood, and smeared it across the stone altar. The moment it touched the cold surface, the world went still. Everything froze. The mist stopped moving, the trees stopped swaying, the wind held its breath. The hollow man stopped moving. He was no longer watching me. He was waiting. I could feel him now, stronger than ever, his cold presence sinking into the very fabric of my being. The price was here, and I was paying it in full. I could feel his whispers at the back of my mind, his cold touch on my soul. "I am you now," he hissed, his voice filling my head. "You are me. We are one." I closed my eyes and let the final words slip from my lips, the incantation that would bind him, seal him in the earth, in the forest, in the very ground where he had once come to life. There was a loud crack, as though the air itself had shattered. The mist exploded in a burst of light and darkness, the world around me shaking, as if the very earth was alive. The hollow man screamed, but it wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of rage, of defiance. He wasn't going down without a fight. The ground beneath me cracked open, the altar splitting in two. The hollow man lashed out, trying to pull me into the darkness with him, but I held fast. My skin burned, my soul screaming for release, but I didn't let go. I couldn't. For a moment, I saw the face of Elias, his eyes wide and vacant, his mouth open in a silent scream, and I knew that I had made the right choice. I pressed the final piece of the ritual into place, sealing the hollow man away. The world went silent. The darkness lifted. The mist faded. The trees stopped shaking. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath. My body felt like it was on fire. Every inch of me burned with the weight of what I'd just done. The hollow man was gone for now, but I could feel it. I knew it. There was no true end to this. There never would be. The town would be safe. For a time. But as I stood there, breathing in the cool, quiet air of the forest, I knew I had done what needed to be done. And in the back of my mind, a whisper echoed, one that I knew all too well. "I'll be back," it said, "and so will you." The hollow man was sealed, but he would never be gone. Not forever. Not while I still lived. I left Black Hollow the day the last of the fog lifted, the town sinking back into its routine as if nothing had ever happened. They couldn't remember the horrors, the fear, the strange whispers that had haunted us for so long. I made sure of that. I had no choice. The ritual had sealed the hollow man away, but it had also done something else. It had taken a part of me, something I'm not sure I'll ever get back. When I stood on the edge of the town for the last time, I could hear the distant hum of life returning to normal. The church bells ringing, children playing, the murmurs of gossip drifting from the old diner. The shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should, but maybe that was just my mind playing tricks on me. I didn't look back. The road ahead was empty, winding through the hills as I drove away. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, I felt like I was being pulled in two directions, one toward the past, one toward the future. I knew Black Hollow had forgotten me, but I could never forget it. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, watching, waiting. It's been years now, but the whispers haven't stopped. Not entirely. Sometimes in the dead of night, when I lie awake in a strange hotel room, I hear a faint voice, soft and barely there. It sounds like me, but I know it's not. It's him, the Hollow Man. His voice is different now, just a shadow of what it was when he hunted me. But it's always there, lurking just under the surface of my thoughts. I tried to push it away at first, burying myself in the busy noise of cities far from Black Hollow. But no matter how far I traveled, no matter how many faces I saw, the feeling stayed with me. Like the Hollow Man had passed through me, like a ghost that refuses to be exorcised, always just behind the door, watching. I've come to realize something. The Hollow Man is not just a creature of shadows and nightmares. He is a part of something older, something far bigger than I could have ever understood. He is the echo of something darker, something that cannot be destroyed. All these years, I thought I could fight it, thought I could stop it from returning. But the truth is, I was never meant to destroy him. I was meant to become him. I didn't want to believe it, but I've seen it now. In the mirror, sometimes when I look too long at my reflection, I see the hollowness in my eyes. The emptiness that's there when I've been alone for too long. I feel it in the quiet moments, like something is slipping through my fingers, something I can't hold onto anymore. And then, last week, I found the letter. It was tucked beneath my door, sealed in an envelope with no return address. The handwriting was familiar, but I couldn't place it at first. I stared at the words for a long time before I realized what they meant. It was the same message I'd seen before, scrawled in Elias's blood all those years ago. You're next. I could feel my heart stop for a second, a cold shiver running down my spine. But I didn't panic. Not this time. Not anymore. I've learned that fear doesn't have a hold on you when you're already broken. I stood there, staring at the letter, wondering who else had already seen the hollow eyes staring back at them. Black Hollow has always had a way of drawing people back, whether they like it or not. I've been thinking about going back. Not because I want to, but because I have to. The Hollow Man isn't finished with me, and I don't think he ever will be. He's waiting, just like he's always waited. I know it's not over. In the distance, the town will forget. They always do. But the cycle will start again. Someone will hear the whispers. Someone will see him, face to face, in the shadows, and they won't know what to do. But I do. I know what comes next. And maybe, just maybe, I'll be ready.